As is usual, if you're not a regular here on this channel, we multi-stream to a number of different locations. We're on Facebook, we're on Periscope, and there we are, we're on YouTube. YouTube always takes a little bit longer than some of the other platforms, but we are now live. And hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler, and I am a criminal defense attorney. On this show, what we do is monitor police misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct, political misconduct. And today, we have something very important to dive into. Of course, you know what I'm talking about. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of the Supreme Court justices for the United States Supreme Court, is no longer with us. She passed away on Friday, and there is monumental fallout. This is something that is major. This is a big, big deal. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to do a special live show. And quite frankly, I think we're going to be doing a lot more of these. Like I said, this is something that is so big. It's like the Super Bowl. It's like a presidential election. Anytime that a Supreme Court judge dies or is sort of suddenly removed from the court in an unexpected fashion, that is a big deal. It's a cataclysmic type of shift that we're experiencing right now. And so we want to make sure that we're at the forefront of this thing and that we're bringing the news to you. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go through, we're going to do a kind of a crash course on how this all works. We're going to do get you up to speed on what some of the politics looks like. And then what we're going to do is going to look at some of the candidates, and we're also going to discuss some of the Democratic responses. So today is going to be all SCOTUS, all Supreme Court. We're calling this the Watching the Watchers, SCOTUS HQ, the SCOTUS headquarters, Supreme Court of the United States. We're going to be diving into this for the foreseeable future. Basically, until we know who the next nominee is, or until that person is seated, or until we have a new president, which may be the same as the old president, or until the world melts down fighting over this stuff, we want to make sure that we are covering all of this and bringing it to you. And so let's dive into it. So I want to get started by sort of describing just how big of a deal this was. So on Friday, when I heard the news, I was in a meeting with two other lawyers, and we were talking business, talking legal things that were going on in our lives. All, three lawyers, three criminal defense attorneys. We were sitting in my office on Friday, and I looked down at my phone, and I got the notification, and I said, "Oh my gosh, is this right?" And so we were sitting in front of a computer, and I pulled it up. And there it was, the headline: Ruth Bader Ginsburg had died. And we think we're 45 days out from the election at that point. And this was something that we were not expecting. This kind of came as a blindside for some reason. I sort of kind of believed what I was reading in the media, that she was okay. For the last year or even longer than that, we had a situation where Ruth Bader Ginsburg was in and out of the hospital, and they were constantly saying she was okay, and she was sort of gone for a while and then coming back, and then gone for a while and then back again. And then suddenly she just passed away. And so it was a little bit of a surprise to me and to my colleagues. Both of my friends, we were sitting there going, no way. It was almost a surreal moment. Like this is crazy. How could this possibly be happening? We're already in this sort of perfect storm of political chaos. We've got the coronavirus. We've got Black Lives Matter. We've got Antifa. We've got buildings burning down. I mean, we've got just sort of chaos out there, and people are already highly polarized. Then suddenly we're going to take this issue and we're just going to shove it in the forefront of everything. And I can't let go on sort of the monumental impact that this is going to have for the foreseeable future. And some people I think are downplaying it a little bit. They're saying this really isn't that big of a deal. A lot of the Republicans are saying, oh, we have these election year appointments all the time, and everybody's just sort of trying to get their political edge by making arguments that I think are good, but they're kind of missing the mark a little bit. This is something that is so big just because of the fact that this could tip the power of the court, and it could lead to ramifications that follow us around forever for the rest of our lives. And so I want to dive into that. So let's take a quick look at what the current Supreme Court makeup was when Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on the bench. And so this is what it looks like. This is the current makeup if Ruth Bader Ginsburg were still on the court. So a lot of people just really aren't familiar with how the Supreme Court works, and so we're going to do a little bit of a crash course on this right now, right? We have in the United States, we have three branches of government. We have the executive branch, which is the presidency. They execute the laws. We have the legislative branch, which is Congress, both the Senate and the House. They are the branch that sort of creates the laws. And then the judiciary is going to be the arbiter. It's going to decide whether laws are constitutional or not, or whether federal actions are constitutional or not. And so the Supreme Court is it's the arbiter. They're governing whether or not, all of this stuff is working as it should. If it's unconstitutional, that goes out and everybody goes back to the drawing board. And the Supreme Court currently is made up of 9 members. And these are the 9 members who were on there. Now, of course, Justice Ginsburg here is no longer with us. But the reason why the Supreme Court is stacked this way is because this is how our Congress set it up. There's no rule that says it has to be these 9 people or it has to be 9 at all. It could be 11, 15, could be 100. There's really no limit in the Constitution that says whether something has to be a certain number or anything like that, at least as it relates to the Supreme Court. And so what we have now, or had, is a situation where we had 5 so-called conservative judges, people who were nominated by Republicans. Alito and Roberts were both nominated by George W. Bush. Gorsuch and Kavanaugh were both nominated by Trump. And they make up the conservative wing. You've got Thomas over here on the end too. He's been on the court for a very long time, also appointed by a Republican. And then we have these 4 judges over here on the left who are reliably liberal. They're almost always voting with the left, and so they make up the left bank. You've got Stephen Breyer and Ginsburg, who were both nominated by Bill Clinton. And then recently, you may remember, we have Kagan and Sotomayor, who were both nominated by President Barack Obama. Now, if you look up here, the reason why I actually delineated this out a little bit, the reason why we're talking about Roberts as being sort of in the middle here, you see some of this liberalness is over onto his photograph, and the reason being is, well, he can be pretty liberal sometimes. If you remember correctly, he was the deciding vote on the Affordable Care Act, on Obamacare. When that went up to the Supreme Court, all of the right-wing judges, they all wanted the end of that act. They wanted to eliminate the individual mandate. All the liberals on the court were supportive of it, and Judge Roberts basically sided with the liberals and said that the Affordable Care Act was allowed. They could impose mandatory things upon the citizens of this country because he characterized it as a tax. And so when we look at this, there are a lot of commentators, and myself included, who don't really think that Judge Roberts is a reliable conservative vote on the court. Sometimes he tends to go with the left. And so this was the balance. You can see it's fairly close. It was a 5-4 type of a situation. And Roberts, from time to time, would vote with the left, and he was somebody who was sort of in the middle. Now, it's also important to note that Chief Justice Roberts is the Chief Justice, and a big part of what I have read from him in his opinions and sort of his public statements, which have been very, very minimal. That's sort of the situation when you are a Supreme Court judge. He is highly concerned with the credibility of the court. He wants to make sure that the public thinks that the court is legitimate and respects the court. And that's sort of why he will sort of walk a very fine line, and he'll find dispositions in cases that maybe you would not say are conservative or liberal, but he's trying to sort of split the middle, which is what he did with the Affordable Care Act. So when we go back to this, we're going to see that it's really kind of a balanced court at this moment in terms of left versus right. At least that's the public perception of it. You can make your positions or your opinions on Roberts, but this is what the makeup looks like. Now, since we have lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the court looks very, very different, sort of up in the air. And this is something that a lot of people are concerned about. So here's what it looks like missing somebody, or this is what people are thinking could be a potential concern. Now, you may have some issues with this next chart, but let's take a look. So here we have the Supreme Court missing Justice Ginsburg. So we've got the 4 conservatives on the right. We put Roberts over here with the liberals because Judge Roberts has sided with the liberals more than the other conservatives. And we have this vacant spot right here in the middle, which would have been picked up by Judge Ginsburg, but she's no longer with us. And so we have this really scary scenario where you could have a 4-4 court where half the judges could take an issue on one side and the other half could take the other side of the issue. And then we have this stalemate. So what's going to happen if in 2020 we have a contested election? People are fighting over mail-in ballots. People are concerned about voting and the U.S. Postal Service and all of these things. We have a situation like we had with Bush versus Gore, where everybody is filing lawsuits and this stuff goes up to the Supreme Court. What's going to happen there if we have a 4-4 split? It's not good. We are right in the middle of a constitutional crisis. And so, or a potential constitutional crisis. And so over the weekend, we've been seeing a lot of people having a conversation about what should happen. Should Trump nominate somebody? Should he not? Should the Senate confirm them? Should they not? We're going to get into all of that in greater detail today. Now, what Trump wants to do, or what the conservatives want to have happen, is that the court gets even more conservative, gets even more Republicans or even more sort of right-leaning individuals on, so that they could make the court look like this. This would be a reliably conservative court, and this would flip it from what we saw previously, where we had a 5-4 to a 6-3. And again, Roberts is in the middle there because he's kind of squishy, at least as it comes to ideological positions. He can sometimes side with the left, sometimes side with the right. And so rightfully, I mean, if you're a Democrat, if you're somebody who is on the left, and you see a situation like this where it's a 6-3, whoa, you are melting down, because this is something that can last for a long time. Remember, judges have lifetime appointments. So whoever this individual is, if Trump gets this person on the Supreme Court, this individual, if they're young, if they're in their 50s or 40s, or even one of the nominees being discussed, if they're 38 years old, they're going to be on the Supreme Court for years, decades. I mean, 30, 40, 50 years, and they'll have the ability to impact policy. So the Democrats have had a lot of responses to this. We're going to talk about some of the things that they have mentioned, things like impeachment, things like court packing. We're going to get to all of that today. Super packed with content today. But let's continue on and just get an overview of how this is going to continue to work. So first and foremost, let's talk about what people are saying. We've got a statement from President Trump, came out over the weekend. He calls Ruth Bader Ginsburg a titan of the law. So the statement from the president says, "Today our nation mourns the loss of a titan of law. Served more than 27 years, notably just a second woman. She was a loving wife, mother, 2 children, renowned for her brilliant mind, powerful dissents at the Supreme Court. She can disagree without being disagreeable. Her opinions were well-reasoned. They included the discussions about legal equality of women, disabled individuals, and so on and so forth. Fighter to the end," Trump says. "Our thoughts and prayers are with the Ginsburg family and their loved ones during this difficult time. May her memory be a great and magnificent blessing to the world." And I think that's a fair statement, a good statement. I don't have anything to add or subtract from that. I agree with that statement. I agree that this was a woman of immense impact on the country, somebody who lived a life that touched many, many people. We have people here working at our office who actually have pictures of her, on their walls and stuff. Somebody who was a legal mind, who rose to the highest echelon of our country's legal system. I mean, that is not something to scoff at. Whether you disagree with her or agree with her, that's up, that's at anybody's perspective. That's fine, and I think fair. And there are a lot of cases and a lot of opinions that I read when I was in law school where I disagreed with her vehemently, and I didn't really understand sort of her judicial philosophy or how she came to the conclusions, because it felt a little bit scattered to me, and it just wasn't one of the justices that I identified with. But you can't deny the fact that her legacy is going to be lasting. She had a major impact on the country, and she was a cultural icon to many people, including inspiring a lot of young women to get more plugged into law, which you never can deny how powerful of a thing that is. And so Trump's statement was I think fine, was well intentioned. It was a statement that Trump put out. I'm sure he did not write it, but it was something that I think covers all the bases. It's not political, and it's honoring somebody in death. I had a video that I was going to put out on Friday that wasn't related to this, but I decided I'm not going to do that. This overshadows everything else that we're talking about for the foreseeable future, and it's also a good time to pay some respect. So, there were people on Twitter, Ruth's body was not even warm or cold, or not, it wasn't even in the ground yet. The funeral has not been had. She just died, and people are fomenting at the mouth on Twitter about her positions on abortion and all sorts of stuff. And you're just thinking, can we just hit the pause button for about 10 seconds? Let's let this family go through what they're going through. To lose somebody this way is just, is catastrophic for any family. And the fact that she was so powerful and that the whole country is going to be having their eyeballs on this thing is, I think it warrants a little bit of grace. So we wanted to make sure that that happened. Now, Trump, releases a nice statement, but he can't help being Trump. So Trump comes back out the next day, and now he wants to have some discussion over her final statements. And a couple other things before we flip over to that. So a couple other points that Trump made. He said he vows to nominate a woman to honor Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He said he's going to name his pick to replace late Justice Ginsburg on Friday or Saturday. He wants to pay respect and allow time for the Ginsburg family to have the funeral services. And so he's going to wait. He's going to give her some space, give her family some time to actually go through with the funeral before we hear more about who his nominee is going to be, which is the right move and the right play. Now, all that being said, all the niceness, all of the well wishes, the prayers, the thoughts, the healing, that all is well, it's all good, but the country is going to just spring load and just skyrocket right into the political world, which is what we're going to get into today. So let's do it. So the first thing that we hear from Trump today is he makes a statement about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her most fervent wish. So we heard this from a lot of people saying that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, her dying wish on her deathbed was that her seat nobody gets appointed to her seat until the next presidential election. Now we know that that's what a lot of the Democrats want. Whether she said that on her deathbed, I don't know. I'm not there to argue with it. If they said she said it, I'm sure she said it. But it doesn't really work that way. You can't sort of hold your seat until you think it's available or you think it's appropriate. We have a constitution which dictates the rules. We've got all the political parties, and the train is moving forward. And so there was some indication that she said that she did not want to be replaced, and there's a back and forth, of course, today. Trump said that Democratic politicians are the one who really wrote Ginsburg's statement, and Adam Schiff responds, says, no, Mr. President, that was low even for you. I didn't write it. I'm going to fight like hell to make sure that nobody gets appointed. Now, I want to go through a couple of the other statements as well. We have Joe Biden, who comes out and says this.
She was, to use an overused word, a trailblazer, a role model, a source of hope, and a powerful voice for justice. She was proof that courage and conviction and moral clarity can change not only the law, but can change our culture, can change the world. And I believe in the days and months and years ahead, she will continue to inspire millions of Americans all across this country. And together, we can and we will continue to be a voice for justice in her name. Her granddaughter.
All right, so we got a nice statement from Biden. It's kind of the same standard stuff. Amazing woman, great impact. That's all well and good. But what are we going to do about replacing her in the United States Supreme Court? Who is going to get her seat? What is everybody going to do about this? Because this needs to get done, or we need to come to some sort of conclusion on this. And what does everybody have to say about it? Well, Joe Biden says that he's asking that the same standards used in 2016 apply in selecting Ginsburg's replacement. So he says tonight and in the upcoming days, we should focus on the loss of justice and her enduring legacy. There is no doubt, let me be clear, that the voters should pick the president and the president should pick the justice for the Senate to consider. So Harris is next. She says she's got a statement from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She says, tomorrow we fight for her legacy. Today we mourn, we honor, and so on and so forth. We have very little from the Biden campaign in terms of what they want to do. They say that they want to honor her wish that she not be replaced until a new president is installed. And I really don't know, I really don't know what that means. It's pretty presumptuous. It's presuming that Biden, wins, that would be a new president. If Trump wins, it's not really a new president. It's the same president, but it's a second term. And so I understand that they want to support her wishes, but that's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution, and there's really no rule of decorum. There's no sort of, rule of etiquette that a Supreme Court judge who dies gets the right to reserve their seat for the next for the next party or something like that. Nothing like that exists. If somebody dies and they're on the opposite side of your party, so in this case, Trump and Mitch McConnell, the Republicans, are in the Senate. They have control of the Supreme Court nomination process. They're going to use that. Just because Ruth Bader Ginsburg wanted her position to be held, to hold on to that until Joe Biden presumably wins, she doesn't get the right to make that call. As amazing of a woman she is, and as much of her legacy will last on forever, she just doesn't get that call. So we can certainly respect her wishes and can certainly appreciate that that's her sentiment, but the country is not going to hang tight. That's just not how that works. President Trump today made another statement about that he's going to announce the next nominee very soon. Let's take a look at what he had to say. And here he is.
So, do you want to see a nominee on your Supreme Court choice before the election?
Well, we'll see what happens. We'll be talking to people soon. We have great respect for the process. This has happened numerous times, and every time there was a nominee, as you know. There's been many occasions where, frankly, it turned out to be during a presidential year. I think I heard 28, but whatever it may be. But in all cases, they went forward. But we want to respect the process, and the process will move. I think it's going to move very quickly, actually. I agree with the statement put out by Mitch McConnell. I agree with it actually 100%. I put out a very similar statement you saw. So I think we're going to start the process extremely soon, and we'll have a nominee very soon.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. When I was listening to some other people talk about this, there were a lot of people, especially a lot of the Republicans and the conservatives, who were saying that it makes sense to wait. One of the original arguments that I heard from a lot of people, a guy I follow very regularly like Scott Adams and some of these other commentators, were saying that Trump should hold this nomination open, should not actually appoint anybody. And so I want to run through some of the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, some possibilities. What could really happen here? Well, number one, we could have Trump holds the nomination open, right? We already know that is very unlikely to happen, but there are still people out there, especially on Twitter, who are saying this should be the strategy. Trump should wait. We're not going to nominate anybody. We're not going to, argue about it because the election is 43 days away, because Justice Ginsburg had already requested that we hold this seat open for the foreseeable future, and we just should wait. It's just too close. Let the American people decide. Does that sound anything like Donald Trump? Like, would he ever do that? If he saw an opening, do you think that he would just say, you know what, I want to be a fair player and be a good sport on this thing. I'm not going to nominate anybody? The answer is absolutely not. That is not Trump's personality. That is not how he runs his administration. That's not how he runs his life. And when he sees an opening and he sees his enemy sort of weak, he is going to crush them. That's just his disposition. And so I never held really any hope that he was going to hold the nomination open. I think that also would have been a major problem for him just in terms of politics, rallying the base. What if you had Trump's entire base who saw him sitting on his hands and not doing anything to nominate somebody who, the conservatives and the Republicans really want this position filled, and Trump's just like, no, I'm not going to do that. Do you think that those people are going to be running to the polls to support him in November? I certainly do not. And also, I think a lot of these other commentators are missing the point. If we have a 4-4 Supreme Court and we have an election problem that requires involvement from the Supreme Court, and we have the ability for a tie, Judge Roberts sides with the left, sides with the liberals, it's now 4-4. We are smack dab in the middle of a constitutional crisis. So that does not make any sense that he would do that. So we have some other options. And I think number two is where we're looking at. We've got a scenario in which Trump appoints somebody and the Senate actually confirms them before the election. So that's scenario number two. And it looks like we're getting pretty close to that, which is why we're gonna dive into that. I've got a couple of the different breakdowns of the senators and a couple of the different candidates, and the numbers just the numbers look good for the Republicans, look good for the conservatives, and for the president. So we'll see how that plays out. We have another scenario, a third scenario, where Trump appoints somebody, but the Senate does not confirm him or her before the election, and then Trump wins. Or the same situation, but the Senate does not confirm, and then Trump loses. All right, so let's talk about each one of those. So if in all these different scenarios, in scenarios 2, 3, and 4, if Trump appoints somebody or nominates somebody, then this is all going to go back to the Senate. Remember, we just went through this with Kavanaugh. We had the Senate Judiciary Committee. They did their grilling of him. They were accusing him of all sorts of, weird sex crimes and all sorts of, things and misconduct involving Blasey Ford 25, 30 years ago. We just went through this. So this is going to happen again. Now think about all of this, right? If we have Senate hearings in front of the Senate, we are going to have Kamala Harris, who gets called back into the Senate Judiciary Committee. She's a part of that committee. I'm going to explain that here shortly. She has to go back into the Senate, and she has to be sort of involved in all of that. She can't abscond in one of the most important hearings of this, the Senate's history, of the country's history, of the court's history, of the president's history. She's got to be involved in that. Now, from what I have seen on the campaign trail, from the news that I've been following thus far, she has been sort of somebody, not really open to answering a ton of questions. I've seen a number of different press conferences with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris where they don't take any questions. Their schedules are not super full, and they're sort of kind of letting Trump be Trump, and they're thinking they're so far ahead in the polls that they don't need to do much of this stuff. Well, if that changes and Kamala has to get, to go back to the Senate to be involved in the judiciary hearing, then now she has to take the forefront again. And that may not really coincide with what they want to accomplish with the campaign. So she could go in front and she could wow the world. She could go out there and she could lead the charge and she could rally a bunch of senators to sort of squash this nominee, and she could come out looking like the hero. Alternatively, she could not be effective at all. She could get out there and she could try to put on a show kind of like she did last time and see that falls flat, in which case now she is sort of an ineffective leader, and that is not a good look for her. So this situation is it could be good for the Biden campaign. It could be not so good for the Biden campaign, but we are going to see. So let's say that Trump does appoint somebody and the Senate confirms that other individual before the election. What happens in that scenario? Well, Trump gets a big win, right? Trump will now have appointed 3 Supreme Court judges to the court, which is a third of all the judges on the bench. That is a huge deal. And many of these individuals are young and they're going to be on the court for a long time. It's going to be seen as a huge accomplishment. But is that really going to sort of encourage his base? Are they going to be fired up, or are they going to be sitting on their hands because they feel like they've already won and maybe they don't show up to the polls? Conversely, this could be a situation where the Democrats and the liberals are furious over the fact that they rammed through a SCOTUS judge with 43 days left, and they get punished massively at the polls. So if Trump gets somebody through and nominates them and they get confirmed, it's kind of a dicey situation, but he does look like he is going to attempt to do that. Another scenario would be that Trump appoints somebody, but the Senate does not confirm them before the election. So what if that happens? Well, we go back again to the 4-4 scenario. We go back to a situation where a Supreme Court could be split. If there are any election issues that need to be litigated in court, now we've got a broken Supreme Court. We could be in the middle of a constitutional crisis. This could be a major problem. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but it is a possibility. Now, what happens if Trump wins the election? If Trump appoints somebody, the Senate does not confirm them, and then Trump loses the election. What happens here? Well, now we have a lame duck period. We have a period of time from November, when we know that Trump, hypothetically loses, up until January 20th, when Biden would get inaugurated. So we have a window from November, December, and early part of January where there's a lame duck presidency, where the president is still the president and the Senate is still the Senate, and we still have the ability to nominate and appoint somebody. So what would happen in that situation? Would the senators who were the Republicans who may not be supporting the nominee at this point, would they come back and support Trump and nominate this person in the lame duck portion of the final days of this administration? Or would they wait? Would they just say, nope, we're not even going to touch this thing because they know they're going to get punished at the polls later? So a lot is potentially going on here. And we have all, this is just 4 that came up right off the top of my head, but we have all sorts of other variables and permutations that could be here. So for example, what if Trump wins, Trump appoints somebody, Trump loses, and we also lose the Senate, or Trump wins, but we lose the Senate, or the Republicans lose the Senate. I'm saying we, but I mean the Republicans, the conservatives. If they lose the Senate, that would be something that introduces even more variables. So there's a lot of permutations here, but the one that we're looking at most closely here is, it looks like number 2. Trump is going to appoint somebody, and based on the numbers, Trump may also be able to get that individual appointed. So we're going to get into the numbers here in a quick minute. But let's go through some of the other stuff that I think is important to understand before we really get into some of the details about who the nominees are and who the senators are and all of this stuff. So one of the big things that you may have been hearing about in the news recently is this concept called the McConnell Rule. The McConnell Rule, Mitch McConnell is in the United States Senate. He's the Senate Majority Leader, and he is the one who is responsible for sort of whipping up all of the Republican senators into doing what the Republican Party wants to do. He is the leader of the Senate. There's this rule called the McConnell Rule, and many people are saying this is actually the Joe Biden rule, because Joe Biden was the person who introduced this back in 1992 when he was in the Senate and when he was discussing these types of issues back during that time. And so it's kind of called the Biden-McConnell rule, and nobody really wants this label because it doesn't feel good. So when you say it's Joe Biden's label, everybody says, it's not Joe Biden's label. He never said that, or it was different. If you say it's Mitch McConnell's, he says, no, it's not like that. So this is, in my opinion, this is the excuse for doing what you need to do to win. They call it this rule, but really this is, we just want to win. This is the we're going to win rule because we have the votes rule. And it works like this. So remember, we talked about it at the outset of the show. We have the executive branch, we have the legislative branch, and we have the judicial branch. And so this is what the McConnell Rule looks like. If you have the presidency, so in this case, the Republicans have the presidency. They are here in red. It's President Trump. They have the executive branch. The executive branch nominates somebody to the Supreme Court, and according to our Constitution, that nominee needs to be approved by the Senate, okay, not the entire Congress. So we have our 3 branches, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, and the president nominates somebody to the court, and that person is approved by the Senate. It's with advice and consent of the Senate. This goes back to the original founding documents when we were having our discussion. The founding fathers were talking about representation, and the big states didn't want, or the small states didn't want the big states to overpower them. And so the big states wanted representation based on a percentage of population. That was the House of Representatives. And the small states wanted a Senate so that we all got equal representation. That's why we have 2 senators. And so when we're putting people on the Supreme Court, we want all the states to have an equal say, so they all get 2 senators, and then we have the Senate Judiciary Committee, and we're only talking about the Senate. They are the body that gets to decide whether somebody actually makes it to the Supreme Court. So in this case, if President Trump nominates somebody to the Supreme Court and the Republican-controlled Senate, you see all of these are in red because the Republicans have 5 judges on the Supreme Court, and if you have all 3 of those in red, really, you only need 2. If the president nominates somebody and the president's party controls the Senate, those 2 parties can nominate that person over to the Supreme Court. The difference is, remember back during the Obama years, we had the Merrick Garland situation. Okay, very, very similar here, except it was even further out. So Justice Scalia died sort of 11 months out from the election, and President Obama nominated Merrick Garland. But Obama's chart didn't look like this. It was different. Obama had the presidency, so this would have been in blue, but the Republicans had the Senate. So the president didn't have both in the same color. The president only had one in the same color, which was the presidency. And now they were very upset. The Democrats were very upset that the Republicans wouldn't put Merrick Garland up for a vote. They wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't notify him. They wouldn't even listen to him or nominate him at all. And they were very angry about that, and rightfully so. And Mitch McConnell said, yeah, but we know you got the presidency, but you don't have the Senate. Now the Republicans have the Senate. So if they have the votes, then they can push anybody they want through. And a lot of people are saying that that's unfair. To me, it's just politics. It's just playing the game. The president has the presidency. The president also has the votes in the Senate. Why would he not do that? And it's not just Republicans or President Trump or Mitch McConnell. If the Democrats were in this position, they would do the exact same thing, would be my guess. hard to mind read and speak for other people, but I would be pretty sure that if they controlled the presidency and the Senate, they would have no problem nominating somebody to the Supreme Court. So that's the McConnell Rule. You're going to hear a lot about that. People are going to be we're seeing all sorts of statements twisting this up. All of the politicians who were, against, who wanted Merrick Garland, all the Democrats, Schumer, Obama, Biden, they all wanted to vote on Merrick Garland. Now they're all not going to want to vote on whoever Trump's nominee is because it's just politics. And they're all trying to come up with these, really clever ways, like it's the McConnell Rule and, the White House and the Senate, and they don't match and all this stuff. It's like, listen, just admit it. You won the election. You won the votes. You have the votes. They don't. So just pass it. We don't need to come up with all this clever stuff. We get it. We know what you're doing. Don't need to be cute about it. All right, so let's talk about how this process actually works. So now that we have some indication that President Trump and the Republicans are probably going to push this thing forward, what's going to happen? Well, just like we saw in the Kavanaugh hearing with the Kavanaugh cases, this is all going to go over to the Senate Judiciary Committee. These are the Republicans who make up the Senate Judiciary Committee. We just talked about having consent, advice and consent from the Senate. So the president will nominate somebody, will have advice and consent from the Senate. That means that it's going to go over to the Senate Judiciary Committee, they're going to do their interview and their review of the nominee, and then it's going to go in front of the full Senate, and they will vote just like they did with Kavanaugh. So who are these people? Who are on the Senate Judiciary Committee? These are the Republicans. You've got Lindsey Graham. We're going to hear a statement from him very shortly. Some other people you may remember: Chuck Grassley, Mike Lee's a big name, Ted Cruz is a big name. Some of these other people, Ben Sasse, you hear about from time to time, John Cornyn. But these are all Republicans. On the Democratic side, we've got these people. Now, you may remember a lot of these people from the Kavanaugh hearings, and specifically the big ones that made sort of big names for themselves were the presidential candidates. Remember when we were talking about this during the Kavanaugh hearings, a lot of these people were running for president. We had Kamala Harris, we had Cory Booker, we had Amy Klobuchar, who were all running at that time. And so they were, when I was watching those confirmations hearings, it felt to me like they were all auditioning. Like normally they'd be at a level 7, but they were at a level 12 because they knew that everybody was watching and this was their moment to break out of the Democratic primaries, and really none of them did. Kamala, she sort of flamed out. Cory Booker flamed out. Amy Klobuchar all flamed out. But here we are again. So these people are going to be called back, and they are going to be the ones who are doing the questioning. So whoever President Trump nominates, this is the panel. This is the Justice Committee, and they're going to be the ones who do that questioning. Now, we've had some other statements from people who are on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Ted Cruz came out and he said that he is very much in favor of supporting a nominee and a vote prior to the election. And here are his reasons. He actually wrote an op-ed for Fox News. You can check that out. But here are the 3 reasons why he says this must happen. Number 1, nomination is why the American people actually voted for Trump in the first place. So we elected a president. President's job is to do their job. One of those job duties is to nominate somebody to the Supreme Court. He's saying we have a president, we have a Supreme Court vacancy. Pretty simple. They should be nominated. He also says that a Supreme Court vacancy has happened many times in the past. So I think he went through in his op-ed, he said that 29 times where we saw that during the election year, a justice retired or left or died, and a president nominated and went forward. And then finally, the last reason is the one we've already talked about, but the idea that there will be a constitutional crisis or a potential for a constitutional crisis if we don't fill that seat. And we now have 8 members on the court. We could easily have a 4-4 split decision situation in a country that's already highly polarized, that already has a lot of concerns about the upcoming election. And so that could be something that really just rips the country apart. So the big reasons from Ted Cruz as to why this should happen. Now, he is on the Judiciary Committee. He's a big proponent of all conservative judges and sort of the conservative wing of the Republican Party. But he's part of of control. He's part of the Senate committee that is in control of this. We also got a statement today, actually literally today, from Lindsey Graham, who is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And so he says he's writing a letter over to the Democrats, the people of the other party, and he says, Senators Feinstein, Leahy, Durbin, Whitehouse, Klobuchar, Coons, so on and so forth. Like millions of Americans, I was shocked. She was a trailblazer, and so on. When the American people elected the Republican Senate, they did so to end the lame duck presidency of Barack Obama, followed the precedent that the Senate has followed for 140 years since the 1880s. No Senate has confirmed an opposite party president, Supreme Court nominee during an election year. So that is the McConnell-Biden rule. That it right there. No Senate has confirmed an opposite party president's Supreme Court nominee. So the Republicans have the Senate, Republicans have the presidency, so they'll nominate somebody. But when it was Obama, and Obama had the presidency and the Republicans had the Senate, they're opposite parties. So McConnell is saying we're not going to nominate somebody in that situation. And that is what Lindsey Graham is confirming in this letter today. He also says, because our Senate majority committed to confirming President Trump's excellent judicial nominees, and particularly because we committed to supporting his Supreme Court nominees, the American people expanded the Republican majority in 2018, and we should honor that mandate. President Trump is currently standing for re-election. The people have a say in his choices. And then lastly, and so this is the paragraph that I was really concerned. I was wanting to hear from Lindsey Graham as to what he was going to do on this issue, because there are prior statements and prior quotes from him where he's saying very explicitly that if this happens, he is not going to vote for the nominee. He has said that on record. Lindsey Graham has said point blank, if there is a vacancy during the final year of a president's term, I vote that we don't vote. We're going to wait until the American people have their say, and then we will support it. Well, is he going to stand by that? Of course not, folks. Of course not. Why would he do that? His party now has the chance to win the game, so he's going to take full advantage of that. But how do these politicians, how do they sort of thread that needle? Well, here's what he had to say. He says, lastly, after the treatment, there it is, of Justice Kavanaugh, I now have a different view of the judicial confirmation process. Compare the treatment of Robert Bork, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Brett Kavanaugh to that of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Sonia Sotomayor, and Alina Kagan. And it's clear that there is already one set of rules for a Republican president and one set of rules for a Democratic president. Therefore, we should proceed expeditiously to process any nomination made by President Trump to fill this vacancy. And Lindsey Graham is the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he says here, his final sentence, if I am certain if the shoe were on the other foot, you would do the same. And I agree with him. And I think this sort of politicking is unnecessary. It's very clear. Both parties should just say, hey, you're right. If we were in charge, we'd absolutely do this. It's like slam dunking on you, right? We got the ball, we're already ahead, and we're going to slam it in your face. The Democrats would do it, the Republicans would do it. That's all it is. Now they can be, they can be civil and they can have these conversations. That's fine. But we all know really what this is. It's saying we have the Senate, we have the presidency, so we're going to spike the ball. When you have it, we know you're going to do it too. So tough breaks. It is what it is. The senators are as follows. So now what I want to do is break down what the current lineup looks like. Remember, the U.S. Senate has 100 members in it, and for a judge, for a Supreme Court nominee to get appointed, to get confirmed by the Senate, you just need 51 votes. That's it. Used to be a situation where you needed more than that, but it's just 51. So you can squeak somebody through with just a minimum number of votes. And so how does this play out? Well, here is the list of 100 senators that we have right now in our government, in our federal government. You can see here on the left, we have all of the Republicans. We have 50 of them in this list. On the right-hand side, we have all of the Democrats plus the 2 independents. So you can see here Bernie Sanders. Well, let me get rid of myself. Bernie Sanders down here and Angus King are the 2 independents who I put over on the right because they typically do caucus with the Democrats and they will vote with the Democrats. I have no doubt about that. Everybody else on this list, everybody else on the Democratic list, they are certainly going to be voting for the against whoever the nominee is, would be my guess. I can't imagine that Trump or the Republicans put up anybody that gets a single Democratic vote, because it would be political suicide, in my opinion. The Democrats do a very good job of making sure that all of their members are in alignment with the party leadership. I think that's going to be the situation here. Republicans are not so good at that. Republicans are, we've got some of these people here, these squishy Republicans who are really sort of kind of wishy-washy. They're up in the air, which is why I called them squishy. They don't typically fall in line with their party. They're sort of in the middle. And we've got some other individuals who we are keeping an eye on. We've got Chuck Grassley. We've got Cory Gardner. These are a couple other senators that may actually leave this category of the Republicans and jump into the squishy Republicans category. And literally as of today, I've got statements from 3 of these people. And you'll notice that what the heck is happening right here, right? What happens if all 3 of these Republicans decide they're not going to vote with the Republicans? So now we have 50, the 47 from the Democrats, plus the 3 squishy Republicans. What if all 3 of these people vote no on the next nominee? Well, now we're stuck with a 50-50 split. The Senate could be split 50-50, and we may not have a nominee, right? Wrong. That's where Vice President Mike Pence comes into play. Mike Pence will then come in. He is the tiebreaker in the Senate, and we could have a Supreme Court nominee with a 51-50 vote. Whoa, with the president's vice president being the final decider on that. Whoo! Oh boy. If you thought politics was hot already, buckle up, because it's not going to get any better anytime soon, as far as I can tell. Now, there are some questions about whether, all of these people are going to really stay with their, stay in the middle or stay on the side. They're going to be under a lot of pressure from both parties to make a decision, and we're going to see what happens. But now let's take a look at some of the statements. So first and foremost, we have Susan Collins. Susan Collins made a statement this morning. Actually, this was this afternoon on Friday. No, this was on Saturday night, it looks like. Susan Collins, who is a senator from Maine, this was her statement on the Supreme Court vacancy. She says 2 parts. She says, in order for the American people to have faith in their elected officials, we must act fairly and consistently, no matter which political party is in power. President Trump has a constitutional authority to make a nomination and fill the Supreme Court vacancy. I would have no objection to the Senate Judiciary Committees beginning the process of reviewing his nominee's credentials. Right? That's okay. So she's on board, right? Wrong. Given the proximity of the presidential election, however, I do not believe that the Senate should vote on the nominee prior to the election. In fairness to the American people who will either be re-electing the president or selecting a new one, the decision on a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court should be made by the president who is elected on November 3rd. So Susan Collins, just from that statement, sounds like she is a hard no on that, right? So it sounds like she is probably going to be a no on anybody who gets appointed. She says, I do not believe that the Senate should vote on a nominee prior to the election. And she just put that statement out 2 days ago. So we'll see, right? What if this nominee, she hasn't even heard the nominee yet. She doesn't even know who it is. So is she going to stay by that? Or what if it's really close and they just need her vote? Is she going to stick with that? I'm sure her office is literally blowing up today. All of the Democrats are saying, we love you. Please don't destroy us. And all the Republicans are saying, hey, we love you too. Just come on back and just cast that vote in our favor. We have another statement from Lisa Murkowski. Lisa Murkowski is a senator from Alaska, and here's what she has to say. So what is she going to do? She's a Republican from Alaska, and she says that she opposes taking up a Supreme Court nomination prior to Election Day, becoming the second GOP senator to voice opposition. She says, for weeks, I have stated that I would not support taking up a potential Supreme Court vacancy this close to the election. Sadly, what was then a hypothetical is now a reality, but my position has not changed. I did not support taking up a nomination 8 months before the 2016 election to fill the vacancy created by the passing of Justice Scalia. We are now even closer to the 2020 election, less than 2 months out, and I believe the same standard must not apply, but she did not say whether she would oppose the nominee if Joe Biden wins the presidency. So that was sort of that fourth scenario where what happens if Trump loses, but he's still in office for a couple months? Is she going to support a nominee at that time? So it looks like we've got 2 hard no's at this point. We've got Susan Collins, we've got Lisa Murkowski, who are saying no. So Mitt Romney is really the only one left of the 3 squishy Republicans, and they're going to be trying to peel off other people, of course, but those 3 are the big ones. And do we have a statement from Mitt Romney at this point in time? And the answer is no, we do not. So I was trying to find one today. This is the most reliable thing that I was able to find. Cassie Hunt says Mitt Romney doesn't plan a statement on the vote until after Tuesday, a GOP conference lunch. He wants to hear Mitch McConnell out before making up his mind. So Looks like we're going to know more about that maybe tomorrow. They're going to have a meeting tomorrow, and this is going to be a big deal. If Mitt Romney decides that he's not going to support voting for somebody, now we're looking at a 50-50 split. We're looking at those three joining the Democrats. Very unlikely that the Republicans are going to pull anybody off of the Democrats. So it's now a 50-50 situation, and Mike Pence could be that final vote to make it a 51-50. With 101 votes, we get a new Supreme Court judge literally on the eve of the election. And it wouldn't put it past Mitt Romney. If you've been following any of his career for a long time, you know that he's he kind of likes to thumb his nose up at Trump. This was a guy who had a lot of really bad things to say about Trump all throughout the election. He was a never Trumper and leading the never Trump movement. And if you recall, I think he was the only Republican who actually voted for impeachment. So the only Republican in the entire party in the Senate who actually voted to impeach President Trump. So now he's got an opportunity to really thumb his nose at this administration and derail their Supreme Court nominee. Is he going to take it? Is he going to be, that spiteful? Or maybe it's really what he believes. Maybe this is his true belief. Who knows? But we'll see. If they nominate somebody and Romney decides that he's not going to support a conservative nominee. Remember back when Romney was running against Obama and he was doing this, I'm an extreme conservative thing, and judges. We'll see what he does. Now he's got an opportunity to put a judge up on the Supreme Court. We'll see what he does. See if he decides to do that or not. All right, now that we know a little bit about the backdrop and how this is all working, let's take a look at some of the potential nominees, shall we? We've got some names being floated around, and I want to run through them. So I want to show you a website that is very interesting. It's called Predict It. And you can type this into Google, and it's going to show you sort of what the betting odds look like. So the way this works, think of it sort of like the stock market. You can pick a stock, and you can buy shares in a particular bet or in an individual or in an outcome or in an opportunity, and you can wager on it. And you can say, I want to buy 10 shares that Joe Biden wins the presidency. And you say, well, how much are those shares going for? They're 89 cents a share. Great. I'm going to buy 10 shares of that. It's going to cost me $8.90, and great. And that's it. And if they win, if he wins, those shares will go up to 100. And so you'll get the difference. You'll actually make some money. 100 minus the 89, you'll pocket 11 cents. Life's good. So people are doing that on this particular website called Predict It. And so while we're waiting for polls to come out across the world, while we're waiting for people to do their analysis and really dive into what's going on here, the betting markets have already spoken. And here's what we are looking at. We have, looks like 5 names here. We've got Amy Coney Barrett, who is currently leading the top of the list. So people are saying that it's most likely, or they want to buy shares that she is going to win. So you can buy shares at 66 cents a share, or you can say no, and you can buy those at 35 cents a share. So this is showing you who is most likely according to the betting odds. So this is just everyday people. These are not political reports. This is people speculating and people sharing ideas. But this is it. People are putting their money on these 5 names. We've got Amy Coney Barrett at the top. We've got Barbara Lagoa, who is number 2. We've got Allison Rushing. We've got Joan Larson, and we've got Bridget Beatty, I think is how we say her name. And she's sort of at the bottom. And there's 36 more individuals who are on this list. Now, you may remember that President Trump recently released a list of people who he would consider for the next nominee, and many of these names come from that list. And if we look at a sort of a different, let's switch over here. If we look at a different graph, you can see here that just over the last few days that there's been some movement. So Amy Coney Barrett was down here. Nobody was even, this was not even a conversation on the 17th because Ruth Bader Ginsburg died on the 18th, and then more and more of the bets started getting placed. So you can see there was no betting volume at this time, but there was a lot of betting volume for the subsequent days. Amy Coney Barrett went up dramatically on the 19th, and then she kind of came back down to earth. There's been some conversations that Barbara Lagoa is now going to move up because people are liking what they're hearing about her, and we're going to see some movement. We have Rushing, who basically stayed the same. She's hovering right around, I don't know, what is that, 5, 6, 7 cents. And Lagoa's going up. Amy Coney Barrett is coming down. And so this is going to be something that's going to be fun to sort of monitor the betting markets, monitor the polls. President Trump has said that he is going to make that announcement on Friday or Saturday. And so we're going to keep just scraping that news and just peering in with a magnifying glass and a microscope to really decide or really see if we can tease out any hints or any indication as to who this nominee is going to be. We do know that there are some other people who are a lot more plugged in than I am who are indicating that they know a little bit more about the direction this is heading. So we have Emerald Robinson on Twitter. She is from Newsmax. She's a White House correspondent. She was at One American News Network, and she has an update. I don't know, how valid this is or whether there's any veracity to it, but she says, I'm hearing Barbara Lagoa is out of the running now. Bade is the dark horse, and ACB, which is Amy Coney Barrett, is still in the lead. And so we can take that for what it's worth. Now, let's take a look at a little bit of a deeper dive into some of these individuals. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one of these individuals, but let's take a look at Amy Coney Barrett first. We have here, she was a former law clerk to Justice Antonin Scalia, and that was a judge who is sort of, legendary in court circles. Scalia had very, very fiery opinions, very sort of vitriolic in a lot of ways, very colorful, very aggressive. He was somebody who was a strict sort of constructionist. He looked at the Constitution and said, this is what it said then, this is what it means now, and it means what it said back then. In other words, the Constitution is not this ongoing, evolving document. We're not going to make policy in court decisions or with the law. This is somebody who's just going to read the text and interpret it and apply it to the facts in front of him. So Amy Coney Barrett was a justice to him, or was a clerk for him. And then Trump also picked her, and her name, if you remember, her name was in contention a lot. Even when we were talking about Judge Kavanaugh, her name was being floated around a lot. She was sort of, I think, second after Brett Kavanaugh. She was recently appointed to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, and she was a professor of law at the Notre Dame. Couple things. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said at a news conference on Sunday evening that she stands for all the things that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was against. And so many people think that the vast majority of American people are against. And she's pro-life. She supports the Second Amendment. And there's some clips floating around of her being interviewed, but I think it was Dianne Feinstein, a senator from California, who was indicating that, there's concerns if she's on the bench because she's so Catholic, that there's this idea that she's going to be sort of enacting whatever the Pope and the Catholic Church want to do. So there are some reservations there. Whether those are legitimate or not, you can run with it. We also have Barbara Lagoa. Barbara Lagoa, I've seen a lot more of the civil libertarians, people like Robert Barnes, other attorneys out there who are sort of, small government, less corporate influence, more civil rights, more civil liberties, are a fan of her, Barbara Lagoa. And they're saying that she was appointed to the 11th Circuit. There's some indication that her opinions or rulings are very good. I have not taken a deep dive into them. She is the first Hispanic Cuban-American woman on the Supreme Court of Florida, which Florida is a very big state in this election. President Trump and Vice President Biden, they both need to win Florida in order to really sort of leap or spring their chances into the White House. And if she was appointed, then she would be the second justice of Latina descent. And so that would be something that would be very good for a political season, right? If Trump needs more of the Hispanic vote, if he needs Florida, if he wants to play up that immigrant story, especially, the Hispanic Cuban immigrant story, that all sounds very, very good for this election season. As you can tell, nobody's really talking about these people's, judicial history, because this is basically political at this point. Of course, once we know who the nominee is, then we can start to dissect a little bit further and say, well, what is this person going to do on the bench, or what can we predict, or how is this going to impact current cases? But at the time being, We just don't even know who that person is. Another name that has been floated around is Allison Jones Rushing. She served on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals since her Senate confirmation in March 2019. She is very young. She's 38 years old. She would serve through multiple administrations. She would be on the court for decades. And a lot of people have criticisms because she is so young. And they're also saying that she's got some religious ties to a group called the Alliance for Defending Freedom, which is a Christian nonprofit organization that advocates for religious freedom, sanctity of life, and marriage, and all of those things. So, anytime somebody's involved with some of those social issues, a lot of people on the left who are concerned that, a religiously activated court is going to start sort of impinging or infringing on their freedoms, that's obviously a concern. So Allison Jones Rushing, she's 38. I don't think that she's going to be the nominee. That is very young. I am 35, so she's got 3 years on me. I don't think I'm in any position to be on the Supreme Court. Maybe she is. She's probably brilliant, but 38 just seems a little bit young to me. Now, she is on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, very young there, so she is probably just a prodigy and probably has a mental, intellectual capability that is very difficult to even quantify. So we'll see what happens with her. I think she is very young. There was another name floating around, which I think is a hard not going to happen. This is Amul Thapar, who is the judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, also nominated by President Trump. And this would be the first Asian American who would be on the court. I just don't think that's going to happen because it's a male. It's just male. Ginsburg was female, and they're going to want to put another female on the courts. So those are some of the people who I think are floating around. We're going to learn more in upcoming days. We're going to continue to follow this. We're going to basically follow this entire race as it continues to move forward. So if you're not already subscribing to this channel, now's a good time to do that. For the foreseeable future, I'm going to do my very, very best to do a live stream covering this stuff every day. Supreme Court change, the transition, the shift in the power, the election, all of this stuff going on. There is too much to not talk about. So normally we do a show Wednesdays at 4 p.m., but every day of the week, I'm going to do my very best to live stream at 4 p.m. and we're going to do updates on all of the cases we've been covering previously, but we're going to have a big focus on the Supreme Court. So if you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. This is going to be the place to be. We're going to give you the news that we find, and it's going to be in-depth and it's going to be detailed, just like we're doing here today. All right, so what are the Democrats going to do now? So we went through a couple different scenarios, and we looked at the situation where President Trump nominates somebody, and it looks like even if the three squishy Republicans join the Democrats and it's a 50-50 split, looking like maybe Mike Pence is the 51st vote, and the nominee goes forward. So what are the Democrats going to do? We have been seeing a lot in the news from a number of different people. First and foremost, we saw Nancy Pelosi over the weekend, who came out and said, we have our options. We have arrows in our quiver, and we're going to use them. She was on with George Stephanopoulos in this weird sort of interview where she was talking with him, and then he asked her a question, and she started the interview over again. You may have seen that, but she was in the middle of a thought, and then she said, "Good morning, it's Sunday morning," or "Good morning, it's Sunday morning," and sort of started it over again. A little strange, but it could have been a joke. Who knows what it is? But the takeaway is we have options in our quiver, arrows in our quiver, and they are going to use them. One that has been floated comes from AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She says that the House must consider all options to block the administration from pushing through a nominee to the Supreme Court, including possibly seeking the impeachment of President Trump and AG Bill Barr. So actually going the impeachment route in order to derail the Supreme Court nomination. She was asked during a press conference on Sunday whether she felt the House would employ impeachment tactics against the president, and she said that she believed that there has been an, quote, an enormous amount of lawbreaking in the Trump administration. The Attorney General is unfit for office and has pursued potentially lawbreaking behavior. So what does that mean? I mean, how do they impeach somebody? Why would they do that? Well, if you look closely through the Senate rules, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see the rules actually will tell you that, I clipped this from this document here, but there are rules in the Senate that say if you start the impeachment process, that you have to give notice to the Senate, and the Senate shall be suspended. So let's say this. We now know that we're going to impeach, let's say, William Barr. The rules say in the House that at 12:30 o'clock, or at whatever hour that the Senate wants of the day of the appointed trial, the legislative and the executive business of the Senate shall be suspended. The legislative and the executive business of the Senate shall be suspended, and the secretary shall give notice to the House of Representatives that it's ready to proceed with the impeachment of Bill Barr. So the impeachment rules would be used as a mechanism to stop the Senate from moving forward. They would start the impeachment. That would put the Senate on hold, and that would mean that they can't move forward with the judicial nomination. So somebody in AOC's office, brought this up, and they're actually floating this around like this would be a good idea. President Trump sort of is relishing the idea. He says that nominating a justice to the high court is part of Trump's constitutional duty. And he said, if they're going to impeach me, so that they're going to impeach me for doing what I constitutionally have to do. And if they do that, we are now going to win all of the elections. We're going to win them forever. So it's certainly a precarious situation. If they're going to be impeaching somebody, which is claiming somebody broke a law or committed a crime, in order to work themselves around the constitutional structure, the constitutional rules that we have in place, which have already been defined. We have a Senate, we have a presidency, they're of the same party. Senate can confirm somebody, president can nominate somebody. They've agreed to do it. They're going to do that and nominate somebody to the Supreme Court. But now the House of Representatives is saying, well, we're going to derail that because we're going to start the impeachment proceedings against Bill Barr, which is then going to sort of disallow the Senate from conducting their regular, ordinary business. It's about to get messy. We're going to see whether they will follow through with that. I think it would be politically not any good. But there's a good argument that even nominating somebody or moving forward with this is also not politically good. So everybody is sort of on thin ice here. Everybody's going to be sort of, I think, squirreling around for a little while until we get our bearing straight on how this stuff is going to move forward. We also have another response from the Democrats. And so we have been hearing from some individuals about this concept of court packing. Have you heard of this court packing concept? So Representative Joe Kennedy, you may remember this individual. This guy, he gave a response to one of the State of the Unions, and he had all of that lip gloss on his mouth, and you could see like this shine that was like everywhere on his face. It was not very flattering, but that was his big debut. And he is still lingering around. I think he just lost his election running for Senate wherever he was during the primaries. And so he's got a new statement out today. It's this individual is mostly inconsequential to American politics at this point in time. But he says if he holds a vote in 2020, we pack the court in 2021. So he's saying if Donald Trump or if Mitch McConnell, if they hold the vote in 2020, we're going to pack the court in 2021. So what the heck does that even mean? We're going to talk about court packing. So remember, when we talk about the U.S. Constitution, it says that we form a judiciary branch. We form the court, but it doesn't really dictate how many judges can be on the court. And so from our history, the United States Supreme Court has had 9 justices for more than 150 years. It doesn't require 9, but the number is set by Congress. So the Constitution says you can have an executive, Congress, and the judiciary, but the Congress can actually define and dictate how the judiciary works. How many judges do we have? How many circuit courts do we have? And what does the federal judiciary look like? So there are 9 currently, but there doesn't have to be 9. And there was a period in time when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the president where he actually wanted to add more justices to the Supreme Court. So they had 9, and he had all of these New Deal plans that he was moving forward with, and the judges kept striking him down. Unconstitutional, unconstitutional, unconstitutional. So he came back. Now remember, he was president for 4 terms. He died in his last term, and then that's when Harry Truman took office, and we were in the middle of World War II and all of that. But there was a period of time when he was doing this New Deal to get the country out of the Depression was his thought process. The courts kept striking it down, so he said, fine, screw it. We're just going to pack the court. We have these 7 justices who are not siding with me. I'm just going to add 8 more of them. And he's going to get to appoint them all. And so that's going to flip the balance of the court. So that's what the Democrats are talking about doing now. They're talking about this court packing. Biden has not commented on it since Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, but he has previously dismissed the idea. But really what they want to do is turn it into this. So court packing would be a situation where we have 6 conservative justices who are reliable conservatives, and this would be the normal court. But with court packing, they would add on these 4 other Supreme Court judges. And so that would change the balance of power from a 6-3 to a 6-7. And this is a real idea. I mean, they're really actually floating this around. I do not know how the American public would respond to this. I am not of the mindset that this would be looked upon favorably. To me, it sort of feels like kind of like cheating in a way, and not something that I think people would respond to now. So this is what we are looking at, and let's take a look at some of the comments. Let's flip back over here. And I know this was a deep dive. I know this was something that's gonna kind of bore some people, but we are going to continue to follow along through this. All right, so let's take a look at some of the comments. So there's no constitutional limit on the Supreme Court seats. That's accurate. Trump will find 1 Democrat from a red state to be his clinch vote. That would be very interesting. Also, they also want to add 3 new states. Yeah, so I've read that as well. So they want to add DC, they want to add Puerto Rico, and there was another district or something they wanted to add as a state, because that would shift the balance of power. If they can identify some demographics that are going to vote consistently left or vote consistently blue or vote consistently Democrats, then they want to incorporate those in as states, give them electoral votes, and then those states can be part of an election every year. And so the Democrats would pick up 3 additional states, 3 additional electoral votes, and they would essentially cement their majority for the foreseeable future. All right, let's see if we've got some other questions. So somebody had a question about rushing. She isn't running because she is quite young, and the younger vote isn't the only one that matters. Not really sure why saying AOC is such a trigger word for people. Oh, that was about AOC. Yeah, Obama was a lame duck president at the time of his potential nomination. Obama party were a minority in the Senate. Trump isn't a lame duck. His party has the majority in the Senate, which is right. So the issue would be if he nominates somebody, the Senate doesn't confirm him, and then we have the election and Trump loses, then he is a lame duck. So from November 3rd, presumably if we know what the election outcome is on that day, from November 3rd over to January 20th, when the next president, President Biden, presumably would take office at that point in time, from November 3rd to January 20th, we have this lame duck session. And so we have still the same number of senators who have the opportunity to push that Supreme Court nominee through. Are they going to do that, though? Probably not, because Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski have already indicated that they're going to wait until the next president has a say in it. So they're probably not going to do anything at that time. But doesn't mean that their votes wouldn't change. You know, let's say, for example, Susan Collins, who I think is also down in her Senate race right now, I think she's down by 5-10 points. What happens if she loses? So let's say Trump loses and Susan Collins loses. And so she's got nothing to lose at this point. She's not going back to the Senate. Or Lisa Murkowski loses. She's not going back to the Senate. I'm not sure if Lisa Murkowski's up for re-election, but you get my point. If they don't go back to the Senate and they figure, hey, look, I'm not going back there, I might as well just get my final vote in. Maybe they flip their votes to nudge Trump's conservative nominee onto the Supreme Court prior to their tenure expiring. So a lot of different scenarios to game out here. And quite frankly, you know, both of those senators, I'm not even sure that they're going to stay hard and fast on that. You know, if it comes and they have a candidate that they really like, somebody Trump nominates that they're really supportive of, they may sort of walk that back a little bit. We're going to see. What they did to the Kavanaugh's family was very cruel and pathetic. I agree with that. I completely agree with that. I remember watching that just thinking, what are they doing? You know, look, if the allegations are true, obviously he should never have been on the Supreme Court, but there was no evidence that we were able to glean from that. We had evidence that happened 25 years ago. The whole thing seemed scripted and fake, and it was really gross that things got that bad. Somebody says, Ruth Bader Ginsburg should have retired under Obama. She thought she would do so under a Hillary administration. Oops. Yeah, that comes from Dan Rose. And I completely agree with that. I mean, this is what happens. You know, this is politics. I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg wanted to hang on because she thought it would be sort of ceremonious if she could have handed the reins off to Hillary Clinton, who was one of the first female president, would be sort of replacing the second judge on the Supreme Court, and there'd be this big, ceremonial thing, a woman handing power to a woman or replacing a woman, and sort of this moment. And I think that is the narrative that they were really interested in. And they played that gamble, and it didn't pay off. And people are also having the same criticism about Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is not a young cookie anymore. I believe he was appointed by Reagan, way back, or maybe it was Bush 1. I don't recall off the top of my head. But it was, he's old, and if Trump loses this election, it's going to be the same critiques that Ginsburg is getting. If Trump loses, Biden wins, something happens to Clarence Thomas. Kamala Harris is now, the president or in the administration, and Clarence Thomas is not around anymore. Biden and the Harris administration continue to move forward, and they get to replace Clarence Thomas. I mean, that would be the same thing in reverse. So Ginsburg, they played that way, didn't work out for him, and now Trump's going to get that nominee. Any other comments? Well, they can't hold him responsible. It's like running out the clock in football. Yeah, I was thinking about a lot of the analogies about the sports and about, playing cards and stuff. Just because they don't like the rules doesn't mean you get to change the rules in the middle of the game. Doesn't work that way. Google an interesting article from Mike Adams, likely timeline of events to take place. Terrorism and insurrection. Trump will likely name a total of 4 nominees. Yeah, if Trump wins and he's got another 4 years, I do think that Thomas would retire and Trump would get 4 nominees. That would be a massive, massive impact on the court. I know that if I couldn't be elected again, you would see pardons and changes like you wouldn't believe. A lot of people are saying that about Trump, that if he does not win, that there will be a lot of information that comes out that may otherwise not have come out. If a state has X number of people living in it, how many reps does that state have? What is the equation in terms of population? I think it's 1 representative for every 500,000 people, something like that. I could be totally off, totally guessing. I don't remember what it is. Trump will get 2 more if he wins another term. I don't know who they would be. So it may be Breyer and Thomas. Breyer, I think, is in his 80s. Thomas is in his 80s. With roughly 120 days left, he should do it if the shoe is on the other foot. That's right. And these would have a lifetime appointment plus staff. Can you imagine how expensive it would be to add more robes on the court? 7 conservatives versus 2 liberals. Not that big of an impact since Thomas is already a conservative. It only impacts the court if liberal judges go down. And that's a great point from Dale Power. And that's something that I think that's why this is such a big deal, why this is so important, because this is shifting the dynamics. So let's go back to the very beginning of the PowerPoint. And we'll swap over here. This is the big difference. Wait, what happened here? Well, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, so I'm going to go ahead and log off, my friends. Listen, if you are not already a subscriber, hit the subscribe button. We are going to come back and do this every day until we have a new judge, or until we have an election outcome, or until the world just melts down because people are beating each other to death over this stuff. We're going to keep covering it. So hit the subscribe button. We're going to follow all of these different candidates. We're going to follow all of the different politicians. We're going to see who's voting which way and who's doing what and why they're doing it. And hopefully we get to see a new judge that we're all happy with, but don't hold your breath for that. So hit the subscribe button. We'll see you back here tomorrow, not on Wednesday, actually on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, 4 p.m. Arizona time, which is Pacific time, which is 7 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll see you back here tomorrow at the same time. If you have any questions or anything like that, of course, leave comments on our videos or send emails to tips@rrlawaz.com. We'll see you here tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you for being here. I love the comments.